The Global Tech Summit in San Francisco was the kind of night where the air buzzed with ambition and the champagne flowed like tap water. October 2025, and the Moscone Center was lit up like a spaceship, glass walls glowing, drones zipping overhead snapping pics for the live stream, and 1,000 people in suits and cocktail dresses pretending they weren't checking their phones for the next big tweet. Ethan Caldwell stood at the edge of it all, tugging at the collar of his navy Tom Ford suit, the one his assistant swore made him look approachable but powerful. At 36, he was the king of this circus, CEO of Nexus Innovations, a tech empire Forbes pegged at $17 billion. He'd stopped counting the zeros years ago. Money was just noise now. The crowd hushed as the host, some ex-Wired editor with a man bun, stepped up to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, our Lifetime Achievement Award goes to a visionary who redefined how we connect, Ethan Caldwell." Applause erupted, sharp and practiced, the kind you get when everyone knows you're the guy who signs the checks. Ethan climbed the stage, all 6'2" of him, his messy brown hair catching the spotlight. He'd done this dance before. Smile, wave, drop a humble brag about team effort, and get out. But tonight felt different. His palms were sweaty, and it wasn't the stage lights. He gripped the podium, scanning the sea of faces, venture capitalists in bespoke blazers, startup kids in hoodies, a few politicians fishing for campaign donors. Then he saw her, Lila Harper, standing near the back in a floor-length emerald gown that hugged her curves like it was painted on. Her curly hair spilled over one shoulder, and her brown eyes locked on his, steady and unflinching. She wasn't clapping like the rest. She was just watching. Ethan cleared his throat, the script in his head evaporating. Thanks everyone," he started, voice rougher than he meant it to be. "Nexus wouldn't be here without a lot of smart people. But tonight, I gotta say something real. The biggest thank you goes to Lila Harper." He pointed at her, and the room collectively turned like a flock of startled birds. Cameras swiveled. "The woman who taught me success don't mean jack if there's no one around to call you on your bullshit and make you see yourself clearer." A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a nervous laugh. Twitter exploded. "Tech King, Mystery Woman, trending in seconds." Ethan grinned, a little lopsided, like a kid who'd just thrown a rock through a window and didn't care. Lila raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching into a half-smile, but her stillness cut through the chaos like a blade. "Who was she?" the tech bros in the front row whispered. The society ladies in pearls clutched their drinks tighter. Ethan stepped off the stage, ignoring the host's flustered outro, and made a beeline for her. The night was about to get a whole lot messier. 6 months earlier, he hadn't even known her name. It was April, one of those foggy San Francisco evenings where the city felt like it was holding its breath. Ethan was slouched in the back of his Tesla Model X, scrolling X on his phone, when Nora Kim, his assistant and unofficial life manager, rapped on the window. "You're late, boss. MoMA fundraiser. You promised." She was 28, Korean-American, all sharp edges and sharper wit, her black bob swinging as she waved her iPad like a weapon. "I'd rather gouge my eyes out with a spoon," Ethan muttered, but he climbed out anyway. The Museum of Modern Art was packed, tech execs sipping overpriced Pinot, artists in thrift store chic, and donors who'd write a check just to say they were there. Ethan figured he'd do the usual. Shake hands, drop 50 grand, bounce in under an hour. He was halfway to the bar when he saw her. Lila Harper stood alone in front of a massive, abstract painting, swirls of red and gold that looked like a sunset on fire. She was shorter than him, maybe 5'6", with skin the color of warm cocoa, and a presence that made the room feel smaller. Her denim jacket was slung over one arm, and her black dress hugged her frame just enough to turn heads without trying. She wasn't networking or posing for selfies like everyone else. She was just there, head tilted, lost in the canvas. Ethan didn't know why he walked over. Maybe it was the way she didn't flinch when a waiter bumped her with a tray. Maybe it was how she seemed to belong to a different world than the one he ruled. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, and blurted the first thing that came to mind. So, what's this thing supposed to mean? Lila turned, slow and deliberate, sizing him up like he was a puzzle she hadn't decided to solve yet. Depends on who's looking, she said, her voice low and smooth with a hint of a southern drawl. The artist said it's about chaos finding order. I think it's about fighting to breathe when everything's burning. She paused, then smirked. What's your take, suit guy? He laughed, caught off guard. I was going to say it looks like my code after a 3 a.m. debug session. Total mess, but kind of cool. Her smirk widened. So you're one of those Silicon Valley dudes who thinks an app can fix the world, huh? Guilty as charged, Ethan shot back, leaning against the wall. But I'm open to being proved wrong. They talked for hours, not about Nexus or his latest acquisition, or the private jet he barely used anymore. About art, about how she saw the painter's brushstrokes as a rebellion against rules, about how he saw patterns in chaos because that's how he'd built his life. She was an art historian, working on her PhD at UC Berkeley, there on a friend's +1 invite. He told her he ran a tech company, kept it vague, and she didn't blink, didn't fawn, didn't ask for his card. When she finally said, "Wait, the Ethan Caldwell Nexus guy?" Her face didn't light up with dollar signs. It scrunched into skepticism. "Oh, great," she said, crossing her arms. "Another tech bro who thinks he can algorithm his way out of anything." "Ouch," Ethan said, clutching his chest like she'd stabbed him. "Give me a chance to prove I'm not a total cliché, all right?" She studied him, then nodded. "Fine. But you're buying the next round of shitty gala wine." 4 hours later, the fundraiser was winding down. Empty trays, flickering lights, a janitor sweeping up glitter in the corner. They were still talking, perched on a bench by the exit, her jacket now over her shoulders, his tie loosened. She challenged him on everything. Why he thought AI could save education. Why he lived in a penthouse that sounded like a museum. He fired back, asking why she cared so much about paintings no one saw, why she didn't just take the easy path. It wasn't flirting, not exactly. It was like sparring with someone who didn't pull punches, and damn if it didn't wake him up. "I should go," Lila said finally, standing and stretching. The clock above them read 1 a.m. "My lift's probably pissed I kept him waiting." "Let me get your number," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. His voice was casual, but his pulse wasn't. She hesitated, just a beat, then typed it in. "Don't expect me to text back about your stock prices," she warned, handing it back. "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, grinning. "Night, Lila Harper." "Night, tech bro," she tossed over her shoulder, disappearing into the fog. Back in his penthouse that night, a sterile box of glass and steel overlooking the Bay Bridge, Ethan couldn't sleep. His bed was king-sized, custom-made, but it felt like a coffin. He kept replaying her voice, her laugh, the way she didn't give a damn who he was. For the first time in years, he felt his heart kick, like it had been jump-started after a decade on autopilot. Board meetings, investor calls, charity galas where everyone wanted a piece of him. None of it hit like those 4 hours with her. He didn't know it then, but asking for her number was the first domino in a chain that'd knock his whole world sideways. Now, 6 months later, here he was at the summit, her hand in his as they stepped off that stage into a storm neither of them could have predicted. The cameras flashed like gunfire, and the whispers were already turning into headlines. Who was Lila Harper? Why'd Ethan Caldwell just blow up his carefully curated life for her? And what the hell was coming next? Hey, if you're hooked on Ethan and Lila's story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. What do you think he's risking here? Stick around, 'cause this ride's just getting started. The first month with Lila felt like stealing time from a life Ethan didn't know he could have. Days blurred into nights, and for once, his calendar, usually a battlefield of board meetings and investor dinners, took a back seat. He'd wake up in his Russian Hill penthouse, the Golden Gate Bridge glinting through floor-to-ceiling windows, and his first thought wasn't about Nexus stock prices. It was her. Lila Harper, with her sharp mind and that laugh that hit him like a shot of espresso. He was falling, hard, and he didn't care how cliché that sounded. They kept it low-key, dodging the San Francisco spotlight. Ethan suggested dives like Mama's on Washington Square, a cramped North Beach spot where the waitresses called him Han and didn't blink at his faded jeans. Lila preferred her turf, hole-in-the-wall cafes in Oakland near Lake Merritt, where baristas knew her order, black coffee, splash of oat milk, and the air smelled like eucalyptus and fried plantains from the food truck parked nearby. She'd sit across from him in a thrifted sweater, hair tied back with a scrunchie, scribbling notes for her dissertation on a beat-up legal pad. He'd watch her, sipping an overpriced IPA, wondering how someone so real had crashed into his world of glass and algorithms. One night, about 2 weeks in, she invited him over to her place, a third-floor walk-up in Oakland's Grand Lake neighborhood. The stairwell smelled like lemon cleaner and old wood, and the walls were papered with flyers for poetry slams and tenant meetings. Her apartment was small, a 2-bedroom she shared with a roommate who was always at her girlfriend's place. Bookshelves sagged under stacks of art history tomes and dog-eared novels. A framed print of a Basquiat hung crooked above the couch. It wasn't fancy. Hell, the coffee table wobbled if you leaned on it, but it felt alive in a way his sterile penthouse never did. "Welcome to my chaos," Lila said, kicking off her sneakers as she led him in. She wore leggings and an oversized Berkeley hoodie, looking more like a grad student than the woman who'd turned his head at MoMA. "Hope you're cool with pasta. It's my grandma's recipe. Nothing gourmet, just good." "Smells like heaven," Ethan said, shrugging off his jacket. He hovered near the kitchen counter, a slab of chipped formica where she'd set out a cutting board and a pile of garlic. "Need a sous chef?" She smirked, handing him a knife. "Only if you can chop without losing a finger, tech bro." They cooked side by side, her humming some old Nina Simone tune while he mangled the garlic into uneven chunks. She didn't judge, just bumped his hip with hers and took over, her hands quick and sure. The pasta came out al dente, tossed with olive oil and a sauce that hit like a warm hug. They ate on the couch, balancing mismatched plates, drinking cheap red wine from chipped mugs because she couldn't find the wine glasses. "So," Lila said between bites, tucking her legs under her, "you ever just sit still, Ethan? Or is your brain always running some startup algorithm?" He grinned, swirling his mug. "Sitting still's overrated, but with you, I might give it a shot." She rolled her eyes, but there was a softness there, a crack in her usual armor. They talked until the streetlights outside buzzed off, about her dissertation on black abstract artists, his dumb college pranks at Stanford, the time she accidentally set off a fire alarm at a gallery opening. He told her about the first app he built, a clunky thing that crashed every 5 minutes but got him his first $1 million. She laughed, head thrown back, and he thought, I could listen to that sound forever. The next weekend, they walked around Lake Merritt at dusk, the water reflecting a sky streaked pink and orange. She pointed out a family of ducks paddling near the shore, and he teased her for naming them like they were pets. "That's Dave," she said, nodding at the fattest one. "He's the boss." "Dave's got nothing on me," Ethan said, slipping his hand into hers. Her fingers laced through his, warm and steady, and for a second He forgot the world beyond that path. The paparazzi he'd spent years dodging, the boardroom vultures circling Nexus. It was just them, the crunch of gravel underfoot, and the faint hum of Oakland traffic. Jamal Carter, Lila's best friend since middle school, wasn't so sold on the vibe. Ethan met him a few days later at a community cookout in West Oakland, a sprawl of folding tables and grills pumping out ribs and cornbread. Jamal was tall and wiry, with a fade haircut and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes when he shook Ethan's hand. He ran a youth program Lila volunteered with, all charisma and hustle, but Ethan caught the side eye. "Man, you're smooth, I'll give you that," Jamal said, flipping a burger with a spatula. "But what's a billionaire want with my girl Lila? You slumming it or what?" Ethan bristled but kept it cool, cracking open a soda. "Just trying to keep up with her, man. She's the real deal," Jamal snorted. "Yeah, she is. Don't fuck it up, Caldwell." Lila, tossing a football with some kids nearby, caught the tail end and yelled, "Jamal, quit grilling him. He's not here to gentrify your block." "Not yet," Jamal muttered, but he let it drop. Ethan stuck around, ate a plate of ribs that burned his mouth, and won a few points when he didn't flinch at the heat. Jamal didn't trust him, fair enough. But Lila's smile when she dragged him into a 2-on-2 game with the kids was worth it. Those early days were a revelation. Ethan's life before Lila had been a carousel of models and actresses, gorgeous women who knew how to pose for the cameras, laugh at his jokes, fit into the billionaire playbook without a ripple. They were transactions, polished and predictable. Lila was a tornado. She didn't care about his jet or his beach house in Malibu. When he offered to fly her to New York for a weekend, she laughed and said, "Why? We've got the Mission District right here. Tacos beat your fancy rooftop bars any day." She called him out when he got smug, like the time he bragged about Nexus's latest AI rollout. "Cool," she'd said, deadpan. "So when's it gonna fix redlining in East Oakland?" He'd sputtered, then laughed because she was right. He hadn't thought that far. She wasn't just brilliant. She saw the world in ways he'd never had to, and it lit something up in him he didn't know was dim. Then it happened. 3 weeks in, they went to the Roxy Theater in the Mission, a gritty little indie spot with sticky floors and a neon sign that flickered half dead. They caught a late-night screening of some artsy French film Lila swore he'd hate, but ended up loving. Walking out, her arm hooked through his, Ethan felt her stiffen. A guy with a camera, some paparazzo who'd sniffed him out, snapped a shot before they could duck. The flash blinded him, and Lila muttered, "Shit," under her breath. By morning, it was everywhere. TMZ ran it first. Tech Titan's new flame. Who's she? The photo was grainy. Ethan's hand on her lower back. Lila's face half turned, laughing at something he'd said. X lit up with speculation. "Hot," one user posted. "Gold digger alert," another sniped. Ethan scrolled through it at his kitchen island, coffee going cold, jaw tight. Then he checked Lila's Instagram. Her latest post, a shot of her dissertation notes, had blown up. Hundreds of comments. Some cheered her vibe. Too many didn't. "Hope you're ready for the big leagues, princess," Ethan read aloud when she came over that night. He tossed his phone on the couch, pacing. "Guess you hit the jackpot." "Jesus, Lila, these assholes." She sat cross-legged on his rug, scrolling her own phone, unfazed. "Yeah, and here's my favorite, another black girl chasing white money. Real original." Her tone was dry, but her eyes were tired, like she'd seen this playbook before. Ethan stopped pacing, fists clenched. "I'll get my PR team on it. Shut this down." "No," she said, sharp enough to cut. "This isn't new for me, Ethan. It's just louder now 'cause of you. I'll handle it." He stared at her. This woman who'd flipped his world upside down, sitting there like a storm, didn't scare her. "How do you do that?" he asked. "Just Take it?" Lila shrugged, setting her phone down. "You get used to the noise when you've been visible your whole life. Question is, you ready for the ride? 'Cause this is just the start." He sank onto the couch beside her, the weight of her words settling in. The bubble they'd built, the quiet nights, the pasta, the ducks named Dave, was cracking. Outside, the world was watching, and it wasn't going to play nice. The photo leak was like tossing a match into dry grass, slow burn at first, then a wildfire Ethan couldn't outrun. 2 weeks after it hit TMZ, the world had opinions, and they weren't quiet about it. Nexus's sleek headquarters in downtown San Francisco, a glass and steel beast overlooking the Embarcadero, became a pressure cooker. Ethan's corner office, usually his fortress, felt like a fishbowl with the blinds up. He stood there one gray morning, staring at the Bay Bridge through the fog, a half-drunk espresso cooling on his desk. His phone buzzed non-stop. Nora's updates, PR alerts, a text from his mom he didn't open yet. He rubbed his temples. This wasn't how he'd pictured falling for someone. The boardroom showdown came fast. Victor Grayson, Nexus's chairman and Ethan's mentor since the startup days, called an emergency meeting. Victor was pushing 70, all silver hair and gravelly voice. The kind of guy who'd built his fortune in the 90s .com boom and never let you forget it. He sat at the head of the long oak table, flanked by 6 other suits, mostly white, mostly old, all fidgeting like they'd rather be golfing. Ethan slouched in his chair at the opposite end, arms crossed, waiting for the hammer to drop. "Ethan," Victor started, folding his hands like a disappointed dad, "we need to talk about this situation. Your girlfriend's got some loud opinions on wealth, tweets about redistribution, inequality, stuff our investors in Texas and Dubai won't take kindly to." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Her name's Lila, and she's not my PR rep. She's a PhD student who gives a damn about more than stock splits." Victor sighed, that heavy practice sound Ethan hated. "Son, I've seen companies tank over less. Optics matter. You're not just some coder in a garage anymore. This is a $17 billion machine, and people are watching." "Optics?" Ethan snapped, leaning forward. "She's not a campaign, Vic. She's my life. If our investors can't handle a woman with a brain, maybe they're the problem." A murmur rippled through the room. One guy, some hedge fund hotshot from Dallas, shifted in his seat, muttering something about market confidence. Victor raised a hand to hush him, but his eyes stayed on Ethan, sharp and unyielding. "Think about it, kid. That's all I'm saying." Ethan didn't think about it. He stormed out, slamming the glass door hard enough to make the receptionist jump. Back in his office, he scrolled X. Nexus stock had dipped 4% after a Forbes piece titled "Caldwell's New Direction, Love or Liability" hit the feeds. His inbox was a war zone. 2 board members wanted private chats. A Middle East VC hinted at pulling funds. He tossed his phone on the desk, cursing under his breath. This wasn't just noise anymore. It was a reckoning. Home didn't offer much refuge either. His mom, Evelyn Caldwell, called that night from her sprawling estate in Napa Valley, voice dripping with that genteel concern she'd perfected over decades of charity luncheons. Ethan sprawled on his penthouse couch, a beer in hand, staring at the ceiling as her words crackled through the speakerphone. "Honey, she seems sweet," Evelyn said, pausing to sip something, probably Chardonnay. "But is this really the time? The Asian mergers next year, and your father's already worried about the optics?" "There's that word again," Ethan cut in, voice flat. "Optics. You sound like Victor." "Well, darling, he's not wrong to care," she pressed, softer now. "She's lovely, I'm sure. But a relationship like this, it comes with complications. We just want what's best for you." Ethan sat up, beer sloshing. "A relationship like what, Mom? Say it." Silence stretched, thick and telling. You know what I mean, she finally said, a sigh in her tone. Think it over, Ethan. He hung up, tossing the phone onto a cushion. Complications. Code for she's black, you're white, and people talk. He paced to the window, the city lights blurring into a smear of gold and blue. His family had always been subtle like that. Polite deflections, never the raw truth. It pissed him off more than Victor's blunt warnings. Lila's world hit him harder. A week later, he flew with her to Atlanta to meet her folks. The Harper house was a modest brick two-story in a quiet neighborhood near Morehouse College. Front porch sagging, garden bursting with marigolds her mom tended like a second job. Dr. Malcolm Harper, Lila's dad, greeted him at the door. He was a retired history prof, mid-60s, with thick glasses and a handshake that tested Ethan's grip. His wife Diane, a former schoolteacher, offered a warm smile and a plate of cornbread, but Ethan caught the wariness in her eyes. Dinner was fried catfish, collards, and tension you could cut with a knife. Malcolm sat across from Ethan, fork tapping his plate, studying him like a textbook he didn't trust. So, Ethan, he said, voice deep and measured, what's a man like you intend with my daughter? Ethan swallowed a bite of cornbread, throat dry. I care about her, sir. A lot. She's changing how I see things. Malcolm nodded, slow, like he was filing that away. Lila's fought tooth and nail to get half as far as folks like you start out. She doesn't need extra weight dragging her down. I'd never... Ethan started, but Malcolm cut him off with a raised hand. Let me finish. I marched in '63, watched friends get hosed down for less than what she's chasing now. You're a name, a fortune. Doors open for you. For her, they don't. You gonna be her ladder or her anchor? The room went quiet, Diane's fork pausing midair. Lila squeezed Ethan's knee under the table, her face calm, but her grip tight. Daddy, she said, voice steady. Ethan's not the enemy here. Malcolm's gaze softened, but only a fraction. Just making sure, baby girl. Back in San Francisco, the pressure kept piling on. Lila's art project, a community program teaching kids in East Oakland to paint murals, was getting flack. A local blog ran a snarky piece. Tech billionaire's girlfriend turns activist or opportunist. Comments online called it a rich guy's vanity project, even though Ethan hadn't put a dime in yet. Lila brushed it off over coffee at her place, but Ethan saw the strain in her shoulders, the way she rubbed her neck like it carried the world. They don't get it, she said, stirring her mug. This isn't about you. It's mine. Then let me help, Ethan said, leaning across her wobbly table. I've got resources. No, she snapped, eyes flashing. I'm not your charity case, Ethan. He pulled back, stung. I didn't mean it like that. She sighed, softening. I know. It's just, this is bigger than us now. People see what they want to see. The breaking point came at Nexus. During a strategy meeting, a senior exec, some smarmy guy named Greg from sales, leaned back in his chair, smirking. Gotta say, Ethan, your girl's articulate for an activist. Real firecracker. The room froze. Ethan's head snapped up, blood pounding in his ears. What'd you just say? Greg shrugged, oblivious. Just a compliment, man. She's got spunk. Ethan stood, chair scraping loud against the hardwood. You're done. Pack your shit and get out. Ethan, Victor started, but Ethan rounded on him. No, he's out. Now. His voice was steel, and Greg blanched, stammering as security escorted him out. The rest of the team stared, wide-eyed, as Ethan sank back into his seat, hands shaking. Victor caught him in the hall after, gripped tight on his arm. You're burning bridges, kid, Victor said, voice low.
Think hard about where this road's taking you. That night, alone in his penthouse, Ethan poured a bourbon and stared at the bottle.
The photo leak had been a spark. Now the flames were licking at everything. His company, his family, Lila's dreams. He thought of her dad's words, the board's warnings, his mom's coded pleas. Could he protect her from this? Could he even protect himself? The bourbon burned going down, but it didn't answer anything. Lila texted him an hour later. "You okay? Heard about Greg?" He typed back, "Yeah. You?" Her reply was simple. "We'll figure it out. Night, tech bro." He smiled despite the mess, but sleep didn't come. The cracks were widening, and he wasn't sure how much longer their bubble could hold. The air in Oakland was thick with late summer heat, the kind that stuck to your skin and made every breath feel heavy. Ethan sat on Lila's sagging couch, a warm beer in hand, watching her pace the tiny living room. Her dissertation notes were scattered across the coffee table, a chaotic map of her mind, but she wasn't focused on them. She was on the phone, voice tight, arguing with someone from her art program. "No, I'm not canceling it," she snapped, rubbing her forehead. "We've got kids counting on this. I'll figure it out." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What's up?" She hung up, tossing her phone onto a pile of books with a thud. "Main sponsor for the mural project pulled out. Said the media circus around us is too messy for their brand." She air-quoted the words, her jaw clenched. 6 months of work, Ethan. Poof. He stood, crossing the room in 2 strides. "Let me cover it. I've got the cash. Nexus can write it off as a PR win." Lila's eyes flashed, and she stepped back, arms crossed. "No, I don't need a white knight swooping in with a checkbook. This isn't your mess to fix. It's mine." "I'm not trying to fix you," Ethan said, voice rising despite himself. "I just want to help. Why's that a crime?" "Because it's not help if it's control," she shot back. "You don't get it. People already think I'm some trophy you picked up. If you fund this, it's just more ammo for them." The room went quiet, the hum of a neighbor's AC unit buzzing through the open window. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration knotting his chest. "So what? I just sit here and watch it fall apart? That's bullshit, Lila." She softened, just a fraction, stepping closer. "I know you mean well, but this is bigger than us now. I need to stand on my own here." He nodded, slow, swallowing the urge to argue. "Okay. Your call. But I'm here. All right? Not over you. With you." She held his gaze, then squeezed his arm. "Deal." The compromise came a week later. Ethan didn't write a check, but he tapped Nora to quietly connect Lila with a local nonprofit that owed him a favor. The funding trickled in, enough to keep the mural project alive, and Lila didn't fight it, mostly because she didn't know the full story. They painted with the kids one Saturday, East Oakland's cracked sidewalks alive with color, bright blues and yellows streaking concrete walls. Ethan sucked at it, his lines wobbly, but Lila laughed and smeared paint on his cheek. For a minute it felt like they'd clawed back their bubble. Then the backlash hit. A small protest popped up outside her building. 10, maybe 12 people, mostly locals pissed about tech money creeping into their hood. Signs read, "Keep Oakland ours," and "No billionaire bailouts." A scrappy reporter from a hyper-local blog snapped pics, spinning it as Caldwell's girlfriend gentrifying the block. Ethan watched from Lila's window as she went down to talk them out, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't his project. It's ours," she said, hands on hips. "Check the books. No Nexus dollars here." They backed off, grumbling, but the damage was done. Online, it spiraled. X threads calling her a sellout, a pawn, worse. Ethan found her later on the couch, scrolling through it all, her face unreadable. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. She shrugged, tossing her phone aside. "Been called worse. Just tired." He pulled her into his arms, her head resting against his chest. "We'll get through this," he murmured. She didn't reply, but her silence said plenty. Back at Nexus, the screws were tightening. Nora cornered him in his office one morning, iPad glowing with bad news. "Victor's up to something," she said, voice low. She was in her usual black blazer, hair pulled back tight, but her eyes were sharp with worry. "Overheard him on a call with some Seattle hotshot. Sounded like they're pitching a takeover. Your personal choices came up a lot." Ethan's stomach dropped. "He's gunning for my seat?" "Looks like it," she said. "He's got at least 2 board members in his pocket. They're spooked about the stock dip and the Middle East pullout." Ethan paced, the Bayview mocking him through the glass. "That son of a bitch. I built this company. He's just been riding my coattails." Nora smirked. "Preaching to the choir, boss. What's the play?" He stopped, fists clenched. "Get me everything you can on that call. I'm not letting him tank me over this." Family wasn't much better. His sister Sophie crashed at his penthouse that night, a whirlwind of blue hair and attitude. At 32, she ran a sustainable fashion startup, lived in a funky loft in the Mission, and usually had his back. She sprawled on his leather sectional, sipping a kombucha, barefoot in ripped jeans. "Bro, you're in deep," she said, grinning. "Mom's freaking out. Called me twice today about the merger timeline. But I kinda love this rebel version of you." Ethan cracked a beer, slumping beside her. "She wants me to ditch Lila till the dust settles, like that's an option." Sophie snorted. "Yeah, good luck with that. You're gone for this girl. Haven't seen you this alive since you coded that first app in Dad's garage." He smiled, faint. "She's worth it, Soph. But it's getting ugly. Uglier than Mom's Botox face when she saw that TMZ pic," she teased, then sobered. "Look, I'm Team Lila, but you gotta know what you're signing up for. This isn't just gossip, it's your empire." The Global Tech Summit loomed like a storm cloud. 3 weeks out, Ethan got the invite. Same Lifetime Achievement Award he'd nabbed in the opening scene, a glitzy cap to a brutal year. He'd always gone solo or with a safe +1, some exec who wouldn't steal the spotlight. This time, he wanted Lila there, on his arm, no hiding. He brought it up over takeout at his place. Burritos from La Taqueria sprawled on the rug because his dining table was buried in prototypes. "Summit's coming up," he said, wiping salsa off his chin. "Biggest tech gig of the year. I want you with me." Lila paused, mid-bite, studying him. She was in leggings and one of his old Nexus hoodies, hair piled in a messy bun. "You understand what that means, right? Not just a date. This is you planting a flag." "Yeah," he said, meeting her eyes. "I'm done compartmentalizing you. They can deal." She set her burrito down, leaning back on her hands. "Your board'll have a meltdown. Investors, too. You saw what happened with the mural thing. This'll be that times 1,000. Let 'em," he said, voice firm. "I'm not ashamed of us." She smiled, small and real. "Not about shame, Ethan. It's about what you're ready to lose." They talked late into the night, the city humming beyond his windows. She told him about the first time she got hate mail, grad school, after a paper on race in art galleries went viral. He told her about the day Nexus went public, how he'd puked in a bathroom stall from the pressure. They laughed, then went quiet, the weight settling in. This wasn't just a red carpet. It was a line they couldn't uncross, a middle finger to everyone trying to pull them apart. "My board'll have a collective aneurysm," he said, chuckling dark. Lila smirked. Good thing I'm CPR certified. The decision crystallized over the next week. Nora warned him Victor was doubling down. More calls, more whispers. Sophie texted, "Mom's losing it, but I'm with you. Bring Lila, she's badass." Even Jamal, after a grudging beer at a dive bar, said, "You're all right, Caldwell. Don't screw her over." Ethan felt the walls closing in. Boardroom plots, family ultimatums, the mural mess still stinging Lila's pride. But every time he looked at her, grading papers on his couch, paint still under her nails, he knew. The night before the final RSVP, he couldn't sleep. Lila found him at 3 a.m. on his penthouse balcony, the bay wind cutting through his t-shirt. He leaned on the railing, staring at the lights twinkling across the water. She stepped out, barefoot in his boxers and a tank top, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "We can still change our minds," she said, voice soft against his back. "I'd get it." He turned, pulling her close, her curls tickling his chin. "No way. I've never been more sure of anything." She looked up, eyes searching his. "You're ready to lose stuff over this? 'Cause you might." "Real risk's losing you," he said, cupping her face. "We're in this, Lila. Together." She nodded, a spark lighting her gaze. "All right, tech bro. Let's make some noise." The next day, he RSVP'd with her name. No hesitation. The summit was 3 days away, and the world was about to see them, unfiltered, unapologetic. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that choice was the match that'd light the whole damn thing ablaze. The Global Tech Summit hit San Francisco like a tidal wave, lights blazing, drones buzzing, the Moscone Center packed with the who's who of tech flexing their egos. Ethan stepped onto the red carpet with Lila on his arm, and the air shifted. She wore that emerald gown, the one that caught every spotlight like it was made for her curls cascading down her back. He stuck to his navy suit, tie loose, hair a little messy, less CEO, more guy who'd just bet it all. Cameras flashed like a firing squad, and the crowd's whispers turned into a low roar. Ethan squeezed her hand, feeling her pulse steady against his. "Here we go," he muttered. "Yep," she said, smirking. "No turning back now, tech bro." They walked the gauntlet, reporters shouting questions, influencers live tweeting, a sea of iPhones snapping their every move. Inside, the vibe was electric but brittle, like everyone knew something big was brewing. Ethan mingled for an hour, handshakes with VCs, small talk with startup founders, Lila at his side, charming the room without trying. She didn't play the arm candy role. When some AI guru asked what she did, she said, "PhD in art history, studying how culture gets gatekept. You should try it sometime." The guy blinked, then laughed, and Ethan grinned like a fool. The award moment came fast. Up on stage, the spotlight burned, and Ethan gripped the podium, heart pounding. He'd rehearsed a safe speech, thank the team, nod to the future. But when he saw Lila in the crowd, all bets were off. "Nexus is my life's work," he started, voice rough. "But tonight's about someone who showed me success. Don't mean jack without perspective. Lila Harper." "Thank you for that." He pointed at her, the room erupting, half cheers, half gasps. She stood tall, chin up, a quiet storm in emerald green. Twitter blew up before he even left the stage. Tech King mystery, woman back in lights, clips of his speech racking up millions of views. They slipped out to a VIP lounge after, her hand in his, the city skyline glittering through the glass. "You're insane," she said, laughing soft. "In a good way." "Had to be said," he replied, pulling her close. "They need to know." The high didn't last. By morning, the fallout hit like a freight train. Ethan woke to his phone screaming. Nora's texts, PR panic, a voicemail from Victor that just said, "Call me. Now. 2 board members resigned via email, citing strategic differences. A major investor from Riyadh pulled out of a $200 million round. No explanation, just a curt reassessing priorities. CNBC ran Victor's face on loop, his gravelly voice damning. Ethan's a visionary, but he's lost his damn mind over this girl. The stock tanked 6% by noon. Ethan paced his office, tie yanked off, sleeves rolled up. Nora burst in, iPad glowing red with alerts. It's a shit show, boss. PR's drowning. Half the calls are about Lila's activist agenda. Half are just racist garbage. What's the play? Tell him to shove it, he growled, then caught himself. No. Statement. Simple. I stand by my choices, personal and professional. That's it. She nodded, typing fast. Victor's on a warpath. Word is he's rallying the board for a no-confidence vote. Ethan's fists clenched. Let him try. Family piled on. Sophie called from her loft, voice tight. Mom flipped Ethan. She had investors over last night, some Napa wine and cheese ambush to talk sense into you. I told her to back off and she cut my startup funding. Said I'm enabling you. Ethan's stomach twisted. Jesus, Soph. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, fierce. I'm Team Lila till the end. Just watch your back. Lila got the worst of it. Her mural project, barely hanging on, collapsed when the nonprofit sponsor bailed, spooked by the summit buzz. She texted Ethan from Oakland. It's dead. Too controversial now. He drove over, weaving through Friday traffic, and found her on her stoop, head in her hands. The air smelled like burnt rubber and jasmine from a neighbor's yard. They're scared of the noise, she said, voice flat. 6 months. Gone. He sat beside her, shoulder brushing hers. This is my fault. No, she said, sharp. It's theirs. Cowards. She pulled out her phone, showing him a new hit, a tabloid piece titled Caldwell's Activist Arm Candy, Cash Grab. It dug up an ex, Kyle, some grad school fling who claimed she'd always chased power. Lies, but the comments ate it up. Vicious, racist sludge calling her every name under the sun. Ethan's blood boiled. I'll sue him. Get lawyers. Shut this down. Ethan, she cut in, grabbing his arm. Stop. This is my fight too. I don't need you swinging your wallet around. He exhaled hard. I hate this. Watching you take this crap. She leaned into him, weary. I told you it'd get ugly. You still in? All the way, babe, he said, kissing her forehead. They don't get to write our story. But the hits kept coming. That night, a photographer tracked them to a diner near her place, a greasy spot called Mel's, all neon and chipped formica. The guy snapped pics through the window, Ethan's arm around her over a plate of fries. Lila's face shifted, not fear, but exhaustion, like a muscle she'd flexed too long. Back at his penthouse, she showed him her phone. Hundreds of messages. Friends checking in, strangers tearing her apart. This is what it's like, she said, quiet. Your every move picked over, till there's nothing left. He pulled her close, the city lights cold beyond the glass. I'm here, he whispered. She nodded, but her silence screamed louder. Monday brought a new blow. Victor cornered him at Nexus, gray suit crisp, eyes hard. You're forcing my hand, Ethan, he said in the empty boardroom, voice low. I built this company with you. I won't let your fling burn it down. Step back, or we vote you out. Ethan laughed, bitter. You think you can take me? I am Nexus. Not anymore, Victor said, walking out. The door clicked shut like a gunshot. Lila faced her own reckoning. She met Ethan at his place that night, still in her teaching clothes, jeans, a blazer, paint smudged on her sleeve. Kyle sold that story, she said, pacing. Tracked him down today. He's pissed I dumped him years ago. Threw me under the bus for a paycheck. Ethan's jaw dropped. You confronted him? Yeah, she said, smirking faint. Told him he's a petty little man. Felt good till I saw the damage. He pulled her into a hug, her head against his chest. You're a badass, Harper. Badass and broke, she muttered. Project's toast, and I'm a punchline. They sank onto the couch, the weight crushing. Ethan's empire was cracking. Board defections, investor flight, Victor's coup. Lila's dream was ash, sponsors gone, her name trashed. The summit had been their stand, but now it felt like a trap. He grabbed a bourbon, offering her a glass. She took it, sipping slow. We're screwed, huh? He said, half laughing. She leaned into him, glass clinking his. Maybe, but we're screwed together. He looked at her, this woman who'd upended his life, who took every hit with a grace he couldn't fathom. Worth it, he said, voice thick. She smiled, small and tired. You're crazy. For you? Yeah. They sat there, bourbon burning, the city humming outside. Ethan's phone buzzed. Nora. Victor's got a meeting tomorrow. It's bad. Lila's buzzed too. Jamal. You good? Heard about the project. Neither answered. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, Ethan wondered if love was enough to hold them up. The summit had lit the match. Now the fire was raging, and it looked like it'd take everything down with it. The penthouse felt like a bunker that night. San Francisco's skyline mocking Ethan through the glass, a bourbon bottle half empty on the counter. Lila curled beside him on the couch, her head on his chest, both of them staring at the wreckage of the past week. Nexus was bleeding, Victor's coup gaining steam, investors jumping ship. Lila's mural project was dead, her name dragged through the mud by Kyle's lies. The summit had been their defiance, but now it felt like a gravestone. Ethan traced circles on her arm, voice low. We're still here, right? Barely, she murmured, but her fingers tightened around his. We'll figure it out. Morning brought a lifeline. Ethan's phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Jamal, of all people. He answered, groggy.
Yeah? Yo, Caldwell, Jamal said, voice crackling with urgency. Got something for Lila. Tell her to check her email. Now.
Ethan nudged her awake, handing over his phone. She squinted at the screen, then bolted upright, tapping open her inbox. A voice memo from Jamal, time-stamped 2 a.m. She hit play, and Kyle's nasally whine filled the room. Yeah, I made it up. Lila never chased me or anyone. Just needed the cash, man. Then Jamal, cool as ice. Say it again for the record, punk. Kyle stammered, repeating it, sounding like a kid caught stealing. Lila's jaw dropped. He recorded him? Ethan grinned, wide and sudden. Your boy's a damn genius. She called Jamal, speaker on. How'd you pull this off? Caught him at a bar last night running his mouth, Jamal said, smug. Knew he'd fold if I pushed. Figured you deserved a win. You're insane, she said, laughing for the first time in days. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he shot back. Use it. And Caldwell, don't screw this up. Ethan chuckled. Noted, man. Lila didn't waste time. She forwarded the audio to a contact at NPR, a professor friend who'd begged her for an interview. By noon, she was on air, live from a Berkeley studio. Ethan listened from his office, feet up on his desk, Nora hovering with a rare grin. Lila's voice cut through the static, calm and fierce. I'm not here to be anyone's headline. I'm an art historian, a teacher, a black woman who spent years fighting for spaces that get overlooked. That mural project wasn't about a billionaire. It was about kids painting their stories. Check the record. My ex lied, and I've got proof. The host jumped in. So the tabloid claims. Bullshit, Lila said, blunt. Pardon my French. I'm with Ethan Caldwell because he sees me, not because of his wallet. Next question. Ethan whooped, loud enough to make Nora jump. That's my girl. The interview flipped the script. X lit up. Had Lila Harper trending. Supporters drowning out the trolls. A coalition of black women in tech dropped an open letter, blasting the industry's double standards. 3 diversity-focused VCs emailed Ethan by 3 p.m., pitching partnerships. The tide was turning, but Victor wasn't done. Nora dug deeper into his plot, slipping Ethan a burner phone with hacked call logs. Seattle guy's a rival CEO, wants Nexus cheap, she said, voice low. Victor's promising him a clean vote if you're out. Ethan's blood ran hot. Time to end this. He called an emergency board meeting that night, 8 p.m., Nexus HQ, the room stark under fluorescent lights. Victor sat smug at the head, 3 loyalists flanking him. Ethan walked in with Sophie and Nora, a united front. Sophie's blue hair glowed defiant. Nora clutched her iPad like a shield. Ethan tossed the burner onto the table, the clatter echoing. Nice try, Vic, he said, voice steel. Seattle deal's off the table. I've got your calls. Step down, or I leak it all. Victor's face went gray. You wouldn't... Watch me, Ethan said. You mentored me. But this company's mine. Your move. The room held its breath. Victor stood, slow, grabbing his coat. You'll regret this, kid. He walked out, 2 cronies trailing. The rest stayed, stunned but silent. Ethan exhaled, turning to Sophie. You good? She smirked. Better than Mom right now. Rebuilding started fast. Ethan launched a foundation with Lila, Art Access, funding creative programs in underserved hoods. Nexus shifted gears, new hiring policies, a mission tweak toward equity. The stock wobbled, then climbed, buoyed by younger founders tweeting solidarity. Sophie patched things with their mom, who sent a stiff, I'm proud text Ethan didn't buy, but didn't fight. They moved into a brownstone in Oakland's Temescal district, a compromise between his Lux life and her roots. It was a fixer-upper, creaky floors and all, but they filled it with her books, his tech gadgets, art from local kids on the walls. The penthouse sat empty most nights. Its view was killer, but this felt like home. One evening, painting the kitchen sage green, they bickered over his smart thermostat. It's spying on us, Lila grumbled, roller in hand. It's efficient, he shot back, splattering paint on his shirt. You're just paranoid. Tell that to your robot overlords, she said, laughing as she flicked paint at him. It was ordinary, messy, theirs. The scrutiny didn't vanish. They still got stares at swanky tech dinners or Oakland block parties, him in a blazer, her in hoops and a sundress. Lila's inbox stayed a mixed bag, praise from students, venom from strangers. But it faded to static against what they'd built. Dinner parties became their thing. Tech execs and community organizers crammed around their table, debating over her gumbo or his terrible attempt at cornbread. Worlds collided, and somehow it worked. New Orleans was next, a trip planned for spring. Lila'd present her research at a conference. Ethan'd unplug. No laptop, no X. You'll survive, she teased, packing her slides. Maybe even enjoy it. Doubtful, he grinned, zipping her bag. But for you, I'll try. And the marriage question popped up. Reporters at events, friends over beers, Sophie with a sly, so when's the ring? They shrugged it off. We've faced more than most couples do in a lifetime, Lila said one night, sipping tea on their porch. Paperwork's just details. Ethan nodded, arm around her. When it's right, we'll know. A year after the summit, life settled into something real. They weren't perfect. Systems still loomed, race and wealth casting shadows they couldn't outrun. He'd never fully get her daily grind as a black woman. She'd never live his privileged ease. They stumbled, argued over dishes, her half-drunk tea mugs everywhere, his control-freak streak. But they grew, always. The best moment came quiet. Lila spoke at a Berkeley lecture hall, unpacking her dissertation, How Art Breaks Barriers. Ethan sat in the back, proud as hell. After, a girl, maybe 12, braids swinging, approached her at the podium. "Miss Harper," she said, shy, "seeing you with him, it makes me think I don't gotta choose between my dreams and who I am." Lila knelt, eyes soft. "You don't, sweetie. Ever." Ethan caught her gaze across the room, a lump in his throat. She smiled, that spark he'd fallen for at MoMA blazing bright. Later, driving home through Oakland's glow, he said, "That's why we did it, huh?" "Yeah," she said, hand in his. "Visibility matters." Months later in New Orleans, they walked the French Quarter at dusk, beignets in hand, jazz drifting from a corner bar. The sun dipped low, painting the Mississippi gold. Ethan pulled her close, powdered sugar on her cheek. "Love you," he said, simple. "Love you back," she replied, kissing him soft. It wasn't flawless. Worlds still judged, gaps still lingered, but it was enough. They'd chosen each other, against the odds, every damn day, and in that sticky, humid glow, it felt like victory. Ethan and Lila made it through the fire. What's your takeaway? Subscribe for more epic stories, and drop a comment. What hit you hardest? Thanks for riding this out with me. See you in the next one.